Good morning, men. Listen, our children are turning 18 quick. It's amazing how fast they grow. We got to remember that now is the only time we have to impart faith, feed and cultivate that faith into a mature and solid rock, a rock so solid nothing can shake them. Men, listen to what Phil Fisher, the creator of VeggieTales, has to say about our children, and listen to what the Barna Group says may happen to our children if their faith doesn't get developed. Listen, it is our responsibility as dad to develop their faith.
You might have noticed that here in America, there's one group that's not nearly as involved or engaged in the church as other age groups, 18 to 29-year-olds. We call this generation the Mosaics, and for most churches, this is a demographic black hole. Just how big of a black hole? Get this, 59% of Mosaics with a Christian background drop out of church after attending regularly as a teenager. Now, on the surface, this doesn't seem like a new problem, and in some respects, it isn't. People in this age group have left the church in droves for decades, but historically, many come back. If you think that's going to happen with today's generation, think again. Today's young adults are very different from their counterparts of the past. A lot of them are rethinking the major things in life. Stuff like whether or not marriage is still necessary, or if the church really matters. What's strange is, the majority of these dropouts actually still consider themselves Christians. They're big fans of Jesus, just not the church. Every Mosaic has their own unique reason for leaving the church, but ultimately, they all point their fingers at the Christian community, and what they're saying is, you lost me. Now, hold on, you lost me? Isn't that a little harsh? Well, maybe, but what a person really means when they say that to someone is, you're not making sense to me. Research from our team at Barna shows that millions of Mosaics don't feel like they can ask their most pressing life questions in church. So it's no wonder they turn to technology, pop culture, and their peers for answers. With all of the resources on the internet, young people have access to answers to lots of things, important and trivial. And some of the answers seem to make sense. But just because something makes sense, it doesn't mean it's the truth. Naturally, all that conflicting information leads to more questions and more confusion. These wandering souls are viewing the world through a distorted lens. They need the wisdom of the church to help them see things through the lens of faith, but they can't even see that. What we need is real dialogue, and real answers to the questions that all too often just get swept under the rug. It means we stop ignoring the elephant in the room, roll up our sleeves, and seriously address the tough questions about science, sexuality, culture, and lifestyle. Let's be careful not to judge them too quickly, and give our young Christians the tools they need to cope with the modern world. We need to teach them to be discerning in today's culture, to be influential among their peers, as followers of Christ. Today's changing world is a tough place to live faithfully as a Christian at any age. But if we're gonna change the world together, we can't afford to let another young person say, "You lost me."
I remember at certain intervals of my youth that there would be this thing that my peers and I would all be interested in, and then all of a sudden it would become obsolete, and in such dramatic fashion that if you didn't quickly catch up and also denounce that thing that everybody was now too mature for, then you yourself would become the object of that same contempt. It could have been a toy we all liked, or a movie, or a genre of music, but whatever it was, once those early adopters had decided that we're too old for that kind of thing, you had this narrow window of opportunity to jump on that bandwagon before you got left behind. And that's because up until the time you were considered properly grown up and living a life of adult responsibility, you're in this massive hurry to acquire more respect, especially self-respect. I vividly remember crossing this threshold when I was younger, where I decided I was too old for animated Disney movies, even though I secretly enjoyed being forced to watch them with younger siblings or cousins. Like, for as long as they've been aware of it, my oldest daughters have been in love with the movie Frozen. We have so many frozen and blazoned items in our house that you would think that we were preparing for a post-apocalyptic world in which frozen memorabilia is the only acceptable currency of trade. And suddenly, about a week ago, my oldest daughter announces to me that she and her oldest cousin no longer like the movie Frozen. And it's not because they actually don't like it, it's just because of some adolescent epiphany in which they've decided they're too old or too mature for it. So now she's become someone who wouldn't be caught dead watching that movie, and in the meantime, I'm the one who has to use the Frozen branded electric toothbrush so that it doesn't go to waste. We hate being left behind the herd, and we hate being perceived as being too fragile to graduate into a more sophisticated strata of culture and maturity. And I think that something like this is what happens to the faith that so many people inherit as children, but struggle to retain as they transition into adulthood. And this is a point that my friend Hudson made in conversation recently. When we're little, we're taught a version of Christianity that is fit for bedtime stories. Something simple, easy to understand, often heretical, but comforting. We paint this portrait of God and Jesus that has more in common with the tooth fairy or Santa Claus than it does with the incarnation of truth, goodness, and beauty. And when I listen to pop atheist thinkers compare God to the flying spaghetti monster or say that we worship an old man in the clouds, I'm reminded that they're not really confronting the God of Thomas Aquinas or C.S. Lewis. They're denouncing a straw man Sunday school version of God. And this is the risk we run when we blur the lines between Disney, the Tooth Fairy, and Jesus, when our kids are learning about their Christian heritage in a way that reduces it or trivializes it to that level of sophistication. When we make Christianity childish for the sake of children, we run the risk that they will end up discarding it like all the other things that they've discarded that were childish as they grow older and become more mature. Now, I'm not saying we can't have Sunday school or a presentation of Christianity that's more suited to the minds of kids. But what I am saying is that we shouldn't compromise it or water it down as if that's helping kids. When I was a kid, I had a children's illustrated Bible, but it had something that most of the books I see on my kids' shelf didn't have. It had an illustration of the crucifixion that didn't really shy away from the subject matter of what that scene actually depicts. And I remember as a kid just staring at that picture, trying to understand what it meant. I remember thinking, this is different. This isn't the same as the Easter Bunny. This is mature. This is chilling. This is important. This isn't something that is trivial, and it's not something that I think I will ever outgrow, whatever it means. St. Paul said, we preach Christ crucified. And I think it's important that something of that quality is retained in the way that we hand on our faith to our children. It shouldn't be watered down just because we think it's troubling. They can handle it, and after all, it's an essential part of the gospel. The other thing that I think we need to do as a church and as parents is to make sure that when they are ready, that our kids encounter a mature presentation of the faith. And if you feel inadequate in transmitting that caliber of understanding, then it's time to grow up in your own faith. You can't ride the crest of Sunday school formation your entire life. At some point, you need to go deeper. As our kids grow into adulthood, they're going to face opposition to their faith, and that's probably a good thing. But if that's the first time they encounter a sophisticated treatment of the subject matter, and it's exclusively atheistic in its conclusions, then their juvenile faith is not going to survive that experience. They need to have inherited something with some meat on it, and it's up to us to make sure that that happens.
So as I was wrestling with this, with how we seem to be teaching Bible stories but not the Bible, I started to look at some of the research. For example, today, according to the latest research, 65% of Christian kids raised in the church stop attending church within 2 years of graduating from high school. They walk away from the church. And I started looking at it saying, well, why? You know, we have so many amazing resources. We're teaching them all these great Bible stories. They've grown up with VeggieTales, for heaven's sake. Why are they walking away? And I became more and more concerned. It's because they really don't understand how Christianity changes your life. And that's something that, to be quite honest, we never taught in VeggieTales. And we taught about thankfulness and forgiveness and kindness. And we taught Christian values. We didn't teach Christianity. And I was kind of shocked when I realized that. I was like, good heavens, we're losing them because they don't know their faith. They know stories. They know, David and Goliath. They know Daniel and the lion's den. They love the stories with cute animals on the ark. But they're not prepared to really think through their faith. And they're especially not prepared for the really tricky questions you bump into later in life. It says, hey, wait a minute. Yeah, the animals are really cute on the ark, but the water around the ark was littered with floating corpses. Is that in the children's Bible? No, we skipped that part. Is that in the Sunday school material? No. We skipped that part. Or why was it okay for the Israelites? Okay, we know the story of Jericho, the walls of Jericho, and they march around and they blow the horns and the walls fall down, and we rehearse that in Sunday school, and we all pretend we're doing it. But then the Israelites rushed in and killed everyone in the city, every man, woman, and child. Did anyone mention that in Sunday school? And so you go off to high school and you've got a skeptical teacher who says, so why was it okay for the Israelites to commit genocide, to kill all those people? Why? And our kids aren't prepared. No one has ever raised these issues, and their faith is knocked out from under them. So I realized we really need to start at the beginning and say, okay, what is this book? Where did we get it? Who wrote it? Why do we believe it? Why do we think it's true? How do we explain some of these really difficult parts that we've been completely ignoring? Until we do that, we're going to keep losing our kids.
My name is David Kinnaman, and I'm an author and a researcher. The statistics are showing that young people are leaving the church in staggering numbers, and I just felt compelled to figure out why.
Hello, I live in New York City, and this is how the church lost me.
Growing up in church, I think I just got too close and understood how it worked the way somebody understands how a business works.
It's just not real or relevant to me anymore.
I don't think God was who I'd made him.
You have a new generation that's asking questions, and they feel as though those questions aren't being responded with honest answers.
I consider myself to have a really great relationship with God. I don't have it in the way that my mom sees.
The result is pretty obvious. Young people are leaving the church, and in some cases, they're even losing their faith.
I don't know if Jesus was the Son of God. That pretty much means I'm not Christian, right?
I am still a Christian, I just don't go to church anymore.
Honestly, I think it's time that we start a real conversation.
We just need to start talking.
Let's start talking.
It needs to be okay to say, you lost me, and not have everyone freak out.
You lost me doesn't necessarily mean forever.
Young people need to express their frustrations, their doubts, their questions. And older Christians need a place to learn and to be heard.
It's about being able to bring up a question about evolution or sexuality without just having a Bible thrown at it.
Look, let's just get it out on the table.
You lost me. You lost me.
Lost me.
And let's get this conversation started.